My mom's boyfriend demands that I hand over my money or he'll ruin my life. I got him arrested and dumped. When I was 13, my dad left my mom for his coworker Diane and completely destroyed our family. My mom spent a whole year just crying on the couch, telling me stuff no kid should hear about their parents' marriage, like how my dad didn't want to touch her anymore. Really messed up stuff to dump on your kid. She kept saying nobody would ever love her again, and honestly, it was exhausting being her therapist when I was just trying to deal with my own feelings about the divorce. My grandma finally made her get real help when I turned 15. The meds help, but she still loses it whenever my stepmom comes up, or when we visit my dad and half-brother. About a year ago, she met Todd at her book club, and suddenly she's acting like a teenager with her first boyfriend. He's always posting about how amazing she is and buying her jewelry, and I was actually happy for her at first. Then he started coming over more and more until he was basically living with us 4 days a week. That's when he showed his real personality. He started acting like he owned our house and we were just guests he had to tolerate. If I wore normal summer clothes like shorts and a tank top, he'd tell me I looked like I was trying to get attention and make me change. Why was he even looking at me like that? Todd tells my younger brother Ryan to shut his mouth and stop being annoying every single day. He calls Ryan stupid when he forgets his homework or leaves his backpack by the door. One time, Ryan was just telling us about his day at school, and Todd grabbed his shoulder hard and told him nobody cared about his dumb stories. Ryan started crying and my mom told him to stop being so sensitive, that Todd was just trying to help him learn when to talk and when to be quiet. She actually takes Todd's side every time. 3 weeks ago, I came home from my job around 10 at night. Todd was drunk on the couch and asked to borrow money. I said no because why would I give my money to my mom's boyfriend? He completely lost it. Started screaming that I was a selfish brat and he'd make my life hell if I didn't give him the cash. He grabbed my water glass right out of my hand and threw it at the wall so hard it exploded everywhere. My mom got mad about the broken glass but not about him threatening me. She gave him money from her purse and then made me apologize to him for being disrespectful. She said I needed to learn to respect the man of the house. Todd stood there smirking while I had to say sorry for not giving him my own money. That night, I called my dad crying. He was furious and said I could move in immediately, but I couldn't leave Ryan alone with Todd. My dad said something interesting, though. He asked if Todd had a job. Turns out nobody knew what Todd did for work. He was always home when we got back from school and never mentioned going to work. He'd tell my mom he had meetings or was working on deals, but never any details. So I started paying attention. Todd drove a nice truck and wore expensive clothes, but never left for a job. He was always asking my mom for money for gas or groceries or whatever. He'd tell her his money was tied up in investments. I checked his social media and found out he had an ex-wife and 2 kids he never mentioned. Found his ex-wife Brianna's profile and messaged her. She told me everything. Todd hasn't had a job in 3 years. He finds single moms with money and moves in with them. Lives off them until they catch on, then moves to the next one. He still owed Brianna $12,000 in child support. He'd done this to 4 different women that she knew about. She'd been trying to find him for months because he kept changing his phone number. She said he was really good at finding desperate women and making them feel special at first, then slowly taking control of their money and their kids. I gave her our address. But first, I needed to get him away from my family. I told my mom I wanted to apologize properly to Todd and cook him his favorite dinner on Friday night. She was so happy I was finally accepting him. She kept saying this was a big step for our family. That Friday, I made a huge meal and acted super sweet to Todd. Kept refilling his beer and telling him how sorry I was for being difficult. He got comfortable and started drinking beer after beer. Around 9, he was wasted and started bragging about how he had my mom wrapped around his finger, and soon he'd get her to add him to the house deed. He said once his name was on the house, he'd have real security. My mom looked confused and asked what he meant. He laughed and said she was so desperate for love she'd give him anything. He actually called her pathetic and said dating lonely single moms was like taking candy from babies. The doorbell rang right then. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I walked to the door and pulled it open. A woman stood there with dark hair pulled back tight and tired eyes that looked like they hadn't slept much lately. She wore jeans and a wrinkled button-up shirt, and she held a thick manila folder against her chest. Next to her was a guy in a police uniform with a badge that said, Tucker Bentley. The woman's face changed when she looked past me into the house. Her whole body went stiff and her eyes got wide. She pointed at Todd sitting on the couch and her voice came out loud and sharp when she said, "That's him." Officer Bentley put his hand up and told everyone to stay calm. Todd's face went completely white like all the blood just drained out of it. He tried to stand up but his legs wobbled and he grabbed the arm of the couch. The officer stepped into our living room and told Todd to sit back down. My mom stood up and asked what was going on and who these people were. The woman with the folder walked right past me and stopped in the middle of our living room. She said her name was Brianna and she'd been looking for Todd for 8 months. My mom just stared at her with her mouth open. Officer Bentley explained he was from the family court division, and they needed to discuss $12,000 in unpaid child support. Ryan came out of his room and stood in the hallway watching everything. Todd's hands were shaking and he kept opening and closing his mouth like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out what. Brianna opened her folder and pulled out papers. She held up a picture of 2 little girls and said, "These are Haley and Susie." My mom looked at the picture and then at Todd and asked what she was talking about. Brianna's voice got louder as she explained how Todd left her and their daughters 3 years ago. She said he changed his phone number 6 times and moved from place to place so she couldn't find him. He never paid a single dollar for his kids. Officer Bentley added that there were warrants for Todd's arrest in 2 counties. He listed off charges for child support evasion and fraud related to false financial stuff Todd had filled out. My mom kept saying she didn't understand and asking Todd to explain. Todd finally found his voice and said it was all a big mix-up. He reached for my mom's hand, but she pulled back fast like he might burn her. She asked him straight out if he had kids he never told her about. The way she asked it made my chest hurt because I could hear how much she wanted him to say no. Todd looked at the floor and nodded. Just a tiny nod, but it was enough. My mom made this sound that was half gasp and half sob. She asked how he could lie about something like that. Tears started running down her face and she kept asking how over and over. Ryan walked closer to me and grabbed my arm. I could feel him shaking. Todd tried to say he was going to tell her, but the timing was never right. Brianna laughed at that. She said she'd heard from the other women that Todd told the same story to all of them. Officer Bentley pulled out handcuffs from his belt. He told Todd to stand up and turn around. My mom started crying harder and asking if this was really necessary. The officer explained that Todd had outstanding warrants and he had to take him in. Todd stood up slowly and put his hands behind his back. As the handcuffs clicked shut, he looked at my mom and said he loved her. He said this was all just his crazy ex-wife making trouble, and if she'd just bail him out, they could work through it. Brianna actually laughed out loud. She told my mom that she was the 5th woman Todd had done this to. She said if my mom wanted proof, she could call the other women and hear their stories too. Officer Bentley walked Todd toward the door. Todd kept turning his head back to look at my mom and saying he loved her. My mom just stood there crying. After they took Todd outside, Brianna stayed for a minute. She gave my mom a business card with her phone number. She said she was sorry for showing up like this, but the Child Support Enforcement Office had finally tracked Todd to our address. She said she needed that money for her girls, and she'd been trying everything to find him. My mom took the card but didn't say anything. She just stared at the spot where Todd had been standing. Brianna looked at me and said thank you before she left. The door closed and the house got really quiet except for my mom crying. Ryan asked if Todd was coming back. My mom didn't answer. She walked to the couch and sat down in the exact spot Todd had been sitting. I told Ryan that Todd wasn't coming back. He asked if I was sure and I said yes, even though I wasn't totally sure about anything anymore. The next morning, I woke up at 7 and went to check on my mom. Her bedroom door was closed. I knocked and she didn't answer. I opened it a crack and saw her still in bed with the covers pulled up over her head. I asked if she was getting up and she said no. I asked if she was okay and she didn't answer at all. I closed the door and went to Ryan's room. He was already awake sitting on his bed. I told him we needed to get ready for school. He got dressed while I made breakfast. I poured cereal and milk and Ryan ate without talking. He kept looking at Mom's closed bedroom door. After he finished, I helped him pack his backpack and walked him to the bus stop. He asked again if Todd was really gone and I promised him Todd was gone for good. Ryan got on the bus and I walked back home. Mom's door was still closed. I tried knocking again, but she told me to go away. I stood there for a minute, not knowing what to do. I called Dad from my room. He answered after 2 rings and I told him everything that happened the night before. He was quiet for a second and then said he'd come pick up Ryan and me right now. He said we could stay with him until things settled down. I said okay and started putting clothes in a bag. But then I heard Mom's bedroom door open. She came down the hall in her pajamas with her hair all messy. She saw me on the phone and asked who I was talking to. I said it was Dad. Her face got panicky and she asked what I was telling him. I said I was telling him we needed to stay with him for a while. Mom started crying again and begged me not to take Ryan away. She said she knew she messed up, but she couldn't lose her kids too. She grabbed my arm and kept saying please over and over. I felt stuck between wanting to protect Ryan and not wanting to completely destroy my mom when she was already falling apart. I told Dad to hold on. I looked at my mom and said Ryan and I would stay if she called Grandma right now and asked for help. Mom wiped her face and nodded. She took my phone and called Grandma. I could hear Grandma's voice on the other end asking what was wrong. Mom told her about Todd and the arrest and started crying, so hard she could barely talk. Grandma said she'd drive over that afternoon. Mom handed my phone back and I told Dad we were staying for now, but I'd call if anything changed. He made me promise to call him if things got bad. After I hung up, Mom sat on the couch and kept saying sorry. She said sorry for not believing me about Todd. Sorry for making me deal with everything. Sorry for being a bad mom. But then she'd start crying about how much she missed Todd and how she couldn't believe he lied to her. Her apologies didn't feel real because she was still more upset about losing Todd than about what he'd done to us. I made her eat something and she picked at a piece of toast. The rest of the morning she just sat there staring at nothing. Grandma showed up around 2 in the afternoon. She knocked once and walked right in. She looked at my mom on the couch and then at me and shook her head. She sat down next to Mom and asked her what she was thinking. Mom started to cry again, but Grandma held up her hand and said crying wasn't going to fix this. Grandma said this was the second time in 3 years that Mom had put a man ahead of her kids. First, she'd dumped all her divorce feelings on me when I was just a kid trying to deal with my own feelings. Now she'd let Todd treat Ryan and me badly because she was scared to be alone. Grandma said the medication and therapy after the divorce weren't enough because Mom never actually dealt with her fear of being alone. She said that fear almost let Todd hurt her grandchildren, and that was not okay. Mom tried to argue, but Grandma cut her off. She said Mom needed real help this time. Not just pills and talking to someone once a week. She needed to figure out why she kept choosing men over her kids. Mom cried and said she didn't know how to be alone. Grandma said then she needed to learn because her kids deserved better. I sat there listening and felt relieved that someone was finally saying all this stuff to Mom. Grandma looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine even though I wasn't really fine. Grandma said I shouldn't have had to be the one to fix this mess. She was right, but I didn't know what else I could have done. Grandma stayed for dinner and made spaghetti. Ryan came home from the school and was happy to see her. We ate together and Grandma told Mom she expected her to make some real changes. Mom nodded and said she would. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was doing homework. It was Brianna. She said she wanted to update me on what was happening with Todd. He was still in jail on the child support warrants. She said there were also new charges being filed for fraud and identity theft. Apparently, Todd had used fake information when he applied for credit cards and loans with the other women he'd dated. 2 more women had come forward since his arrest with similar stories about him. Brianna thanked me for helping her find him. She said her daughters would finally get the support they needed. I told her I was glad I could help. After we hung up, I felt good that Todd was facing real consequences, but I also felt exhausted. I'd spent months trying to protect everyone, and now it was finally over, but I was just tired. The week after Brianna's call, I was washing dishes when the phone rang. Mom grabbed it and her face went weird when she listened. She kept saying yes and okay, and then hung up. I asked what that was about, and she said the bank just wanted to check on something. Her voice sounded off. I dried my hands and asked what the bank needed to check. She said they were just making sure she wanted to take out a big amount of money. My stomach dropped. I asked how much money. She wouldn't look at me and said it didn't matter. I asked again and she finally said $8,000. I stared at her and asked what she needed $8,000 for. She started crying and said Todd needed help making bail. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was actually trying to bail him out after everything he did. I asked if she was serious and she nodded and said he made mistakes, but everyone deserves a second chance. I felt like I was going to throw up. She kept saying maybe he was just desperate and did bad things because he didn't have options. I reminded her that he called her pathetic to her face and she was still making excuses for him. She wiped her eyes and said I didn't understand how complicated adult relationships were. I told her I understood that she was choosing a con artist over her own kids. She got mad and said that wasn't fair. I asked what part wasn't fair. The part where Todd verbally abused Ryan every single day, or the part where he tried to steal our house. She didn't answer. I went to my room and called Dad. He was so angry he could barely talk. He said I should pack a bag and come stay with him right now. I told him I couldn't leave Ryan here with Mom acting like this. Dad said he would call a lawyer in the morning about custody options. After we hung up, I just sat on my bed feeling completely hopeless. Mom was never going to change. She learned nothing from this whole disaster. I heard Ryan come home from his friend's house and go to his room. I tried to do homework but couldn't focus on anything. At dinner, Mom tried to act normal, but I wasn't having it. I put my fork down and asked if she actually gave Todd the money. She said the bank needed a day to process the withdrawal. I lost it. I started yelling about how she was picking a man who hurt her kids over the kids who actually loved her and needed her. Ryan heard us from the living room and came running in asking what was wrong. Mom told him to go back to his show, but he stood there looking scared. I told Mom she was making the same stupid choice she always made, putting men before her family. She yelled back that I had no idea how hard it was to be alone, that I ruined her one chance at happiness by setting up Todd that night with the dinner. I couldn't believe she was blaming me for exposing what Todd really was. Ryan started crying and ran back to his room. I felt terrible for yelling in front of him, but I was too angry to stop. I told Mom she needed to choose right now between bailing out Todd or keeping her family. She said it wasn't that simple. I said it was exactly that simple. She went to her room and slammed the door. I checked on Ryan and he was curled up on his bed crying. I sat down next to him and told him everything would be okay. He asked if Mom was going to bring Todd back. I promised him that wouldn't happen even if I had to move us both to Dad's house. He hugged me and I felt awful that he had to deal with this. After Ryan fell asleep, I called Grandma crying. I told her everything about the bank and the bail money. Grandma said she would be there first thing in the morning. She told me not to worry and that she would handle Mom. Grandma showed up at 8 the next morning. She didn't even knock, just walked right in with her purse and this look on her face that meant business. Mom was still in her pajamas drinking coffee. Grandma sat down across from her at the kitchen table and told her they needed to talk. Mom tried to say she was tired, but Grandma cut her off. She said if Mom contacted Todd again or tried to help him in any way, Grandma would file for emergency custody of Ryan. Mom's face went white. She started to argue, but Grandma held up her hand. She said this was rock bottom and Mom needed to choose right now between her children and a man who used her for rent money and free meals. Mom started crying and saying it wasn't that simple. Grandma said it was exactly that simple. Either Mom got serious help for her problems, or she would lose Ryan. Maybe lose both of us. Mom looked at me standing in the doorway and I didn't say anything to help her. Grandma pulled out a business card and put it on the table. She said this was a therapist named Clementine Duke, who worked with people who had relationship problems like moms. She said Mom would go 3 times a week and also attend a support group. Mom tried to say she was already seeing someone. Grandma said clearly that wasn't working since Mom was about to bail out a criminal. Mom picked up the card and stared at it. Grandma asked if she understood what was at stake. Mom nodded and said she would call today. Grandma said she would wait while Mom made the appointment right now. Mom called and scheduled her first session for that Thursday. After Grandma left, I felt relieved but also empty. Mom went to her first therapy appointment and came home quiet. She didn't talk about it and I didn't ask. The next week she went again. And again. She also started going to some group meeting on Tuesday nights. I could tell she was just going through the motions at first. She would come home and go straight to her room. But Grandma called every other day to check on her and make sure she was following through. I made an appointment with the school counselor. Her name was Mrs. Miller and her office smelled like vanilla candles. I told her everything about Todd and Mom and having to be the one to fix everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said what I did was brave, but I shouldn't have had to do it. She said I'd been carrying too much responsibility for my family's problems. I started crying and couldn't stop. She handed me tissues and said it was okay to be tired of taking care of everyone. She said I needed to focus on myself for a while. We talked for the whole period and she said I could come back whenever I needed. Walking out of her office, I felt lighter somehow. Ryan started having bad dreams. He would wake up crying and come to my room saying Todd was yelling at him in the dream. One night, he crawled into my bed shaking and I let him stay there. In the morning, I realized that even though I thought I was protecting him, he still got hurt by all those months of Todd's mean comments. The school counselor gave me a card for a child therapist when I told her about Ryan's nightmares. I gave it to Mom and expected to have to fight her on it, but she actually called and made Ryan an appointment without me having to push. That surprised me. 4 weeks after Todd got arrested, we had to go to family court. The prosecutor said Todd might try to contact Mom when he got out on bail, so we needed a restraining order. We sat in this boring courtroom with wood everywhere and uncomfortable chairs. The prosecutor stood up and listed all the women Todd had scammed before Mom. He talked about Todd's pattern of finding vulnerable single mothers and manipulating them. Mom cried through the whole thing. I just felt numb listening to it all laid out like that. The judge was an older woman with gray hair. She looked at Mom and asked if she wanted the protective order. Mom said yes in this tiny voice. The judge granted a 2-year order for all 3 of us. Walking out of the courthouse, Mom looked broken. 2 months into therapy, Mom came home one day and asked if we could talk. I was doing homework and didn't really want to, but she looked serious. We sat on the couch and she said she needed to tell me something. She said her therapist helped her realize she put me in a terrible position during the divorce, that she dumped all her feelings on me when I was just a kid dealing with my own stuff. She said she was so scared of being alone after Dad left that she ignored every warning sign about Todd. Having a boyfriend made her feel like she mattered again. It wasn't a magic fix or anything. She was still Mom and still messed up. But it was the first time she actually took responsibility without making excuses or crying about how hard her life was. I told Mom I wanted to stay living here with her and Ryan instead of moving to Dad's full-time. But I had some rules. I wasn't her therapist anymore. I wasn't responsible for making her feel better or fixing her relationships. She needed to handle her own stuff. She agreed. I called Dad and told him my decision. He said he supported me and I could always change my mind if things got bad again. He also said he would start having Ryan over more often to give him more time with a stable guy who wasn't mean to him. Mom suggested we start having family meetings every Sunday night. At first it felt weird and forced. We would sit at the dinner table and Mom would ask how everyone was doing. Ryan didn't want to talk at first. But after a few weeks, he started opening up. He told us he used to hide in his closet when Todd was over, because he was scared of saying something dumb and getting yelled at. He said he thought it was his fault that Todd was always mad at him. Mom cried and told him it was never his fault, that Todd was the problem, not Ryan. These conversations were hard and awkward, but they felt more real than anything we'd done as a family in years. Mom was learning to ask Grandma and her therapist for help instead of putting everything on me. I was learning that I didn't have to fix everyone's problems. Ryan was slowly getting better with his own therapist. 3 months passed and Ryan got more comfortable around the house again. One Saturday afternoon, he came into my room while I was doing homework and sat on my bed without saying anything. I asked if he was okay and he just stared at his hands for a while. Then he told me that when Todd lived with us, he used to hide in his closet whenever Todd was home. He said he was scared of saying something stupid and getting yelled at again. My stomach dropped hearing that. All those times I thought Ryan was just in his room playing video games or doing homework, he was actually hiding from Todd like a scared animal. I asked him why he never told me, and he said he didn't want to make things worse. He thought if he just stayed quiet and out of the way, maybe Todd would leave him alone. I felt awful that it got that bad without me knowing the full extent of it. Ryan looked at me and said he was just glad Todd was gone now and we didn't have to deal with him anymore. We spent the rest of that day just hanging out together without me having to be the parent or protector. We played video games and made stupid jokes, and Ryan actually seemed relaxed for the first time in months. Over the next few weeks, I noticed him coming out of his room more, talking at dinner, even inviting his friends over after school. He was starting to act like a normal kid again instead of someone constantly waiting for the next explosion. Sometimes I caught myself thinking about that Friday night when I made dinner and got Todd drunk. It felt like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few months. Our family was still a mess in a lot of ways. Mom still had her bad days where she didn't want to get out of bed. Ryan still had nightmares sometimes. I still got angry thinking about all the months we wasted with Todd living in our house. But things were different now in ways that actually mattered. Mom was going to therapy 3 times a week and actually doing the work, instead of just taking pills and pretending everything was fine. She was learning to recognize her patterns and make better choices. I was learning that I couldn't fix everyone's problems no matter how hard I tried. Ryan was getting help from a professional who knew how to help kids process trauma. We were all learning what a healthier family actually looked like, which was harder than it sounded because none of us really knew what that meant. We had family meetings every Sunday and talked about real stuff instead of just pretending everything was okay. It wasn't perfect, and we still had arguments and bad days, but it felt more honest than anything we'd done before. 4 months into her therapy, Mom came home from the grocery store one afternoon looking proud of herself. She sat down at the kitchen table where I was doing homework and told me she needed to share something. A guy at the store had asked for her number while she was buying vegetables. She said he seemed nice and normal, and a year ago she would have given it to him immediately. But Clementine told her to focus on herself for at least a year before dating anyone new. Mom said she actually told the guy no and explained that she wasn't ready to date right now. She asked if I was proud of her for making a healthy choice. I told her I was, even though part of me was still nervous about trusting her judgment with men. She'd been attending her support group every week and made friends with other women who understood codependency and relationship addiction. These women gave her emotional support that didn't come from her teenage daughter, which took a lot of pressure off me. Mom was learning to call her friends from group when she felt lonely instead of immediately looking for a boyfriend to fill the empty space. It was slow progress, but it was real progress. 5 months after Todd got arrested, our family settled into a new normal that was better, but definitely not perfect. Mom was still in therapy working through her issues with abandonment and codependency. Ryan was laughing more and only had nightmares once or twice a month instead of every night. I started thinking about college applications and my own future instead of constantly managing family crises. We had dinner together most nights and talked about regular boring stuff like school projects and work meetings and what movie we wanted to watch. Mom respected my boundaries when I said I needed space or didn't want to talk about something. She stopped dumping all her feelings on me and started handling her own emotional stuff with her therapist and support group. Todd was serving jail time for child support evasion and fraud charges in another county. Brianna got some of her back child support, and Todd's other victims were working with prosecutors on additional charges. We rarely mentioned Todd anymore because talking about him felt like giving him power he didn't deserve. Our family was focused on moving forward and building something healthier together, one day at a time.